This very disturbing video, it shows a baby born addicted to opiates. When the mother is hooked, there's a very good chance that the baby could also suffer the consequences. Reuters has done an in-depth investigation, really the first of its kind, of a situation that is a lot bigger than many of us may think. A short time ago, I spoke with Blake Morrison, Reuters Investigative Projects editor. One thing, were you even surprised that before Reuters got involved in this investigation, there had been so little reporting done on such a widespread problem?
Yeah, Rich, it really was surprising, especially when you take a look at what's happening in the country right now. You have what the president is calling an epidemic of opioid addiction going on. And what we found is that babies are being born dependent, one every about 19 minutes now. And so when we started looking into what was happening with those children, the issue wasn't so much that they couldn't be treated for their dependency in the hospital. They were. The issue was that they were often being sent home to parents who were ill-equipped to care for them. And as a consequence, we were finding situations, 110 of them, in which kids have died horrible, tragic deaths.
And we showed our audience just a moment ago, Blake, that really disturbing video of that child, the tremors the child was suffering. And I know they shared that with Reuters, and they thought that it was important that that be part of this story, to put a face on obviously the most vulnerable in our society. You mentioned one every 19 minutes. I think it translates to 27,000 in a year. And we know already of 110 cases just since 2010, and the belief is the number's probably a lot higher than that because not everyone was cooperative with your investigation, of how many kids die when they go back home with what you said was a preventable death.
There are a number of women who are giving birth to children who are born with this dependency to drugs. And the consequence of it is pretty simple, which is that for a number of the women, they're struggling with their own drug addictions. They're taking home a child who, as you see in that video, is suffering from some very serious symptoms, things that may be treated at the hospital, but even when those babies go home, there's still challenges to care for them. And so what's happening in some of these cases is the women are still struggling with their addictions. They may relapse. It's a very difficult time. And sometimes they do things that obviously parents don't want to do. They don't take good care of their children, or in other situations, they're just in a home situation that they don't have any control over themselves. So there's a law that dates back to 2003 calling on states to intervene. It says when a baby is born with that kind of condition, the states should step in and they should ensure that that child is sent home to a safe house, and only to a house that is safe. And that's just not happening.
And it's not happening for a bunch of different reasons, as you articulate. You have some states, I think you mentioned, like Alabama and a few others, that make it punitive for the mother to come forward here and say that she's got an addiction. And then you've got other states that have no laws in the books whatsoever, and many, many states that have no funding to basically put this in place. So even though the feds did what seemingly was the right thing to do in 2003, there's been very little in the way of follow-up and follow-through, right?
That's true. There's really no incentive for the states to do this if the states don't want to. And as you see in different states, some of them are taking punitive actions against mothers, which in turn prompts doctors to perhaps not report some of these conditions to social services. That way, the mothers aren't punished. But it still leaves the child in a very difficult place because, as you know, a newborn has no voice, no ability to say, I need help. And as a consequence, they're often sent home to situations where the care is just not there.
And as we found with one of our states here, with New York, originally in the investigation, your reporters, when they were saying, well, what's the policy? The person in charge of it said, well, the doctors have to notify social services. Then they found out and said, well, actually, that's not the case. If the drugs are prescription, which is a difference than if they're heroin, but in the end have the same addictive components of an opiate, they don't have to alert social services. So if somebody's on Xanax or whatever else, that's treated differently than something else that's a street drug, right?
Yeah, what we found was that some of the women are on treatment for opioid addiction. So they're taking a different kind of opioid, like methadone, for instance. And the idea behind that is that if they're on a doctor's prescribed regimen of treatment, then those people don't need to be reported. The problem is that for a number of those people, methadone doesn't necessarily ensure that they're capable of raising that difficult child. It means that they've taken a step to help fight their addiction, but it doesn't mean they don't need help. And so when we interviewed all of these mothers, we interviewed a number of mothers who were in prison for accidentally killing their children. They told us, look, if there's one thing we wanted somebody to step in and help us, offer us some help.
Blake, maybe it would help if we put a face on one of these stories, and again, so many of them were tragic. I mean, there was one story where a woman high on drugs literally put an infant in to the washing machine along with dirty clothes and killed the child. But one of the stories stuck with me was Braden Cummings. If you can tell folks about this little child and how I think one of the family members said the kid never had a chance. Talk about what happened to him.
Yeah, the grandfather of Braden Cummings said that kid was doomed. He never had a chance. Now, Braden was born to a woman named Tori Schleer, and Tori was struggling with drugs most of her adolescence, teenage years. And Braden was born, Tori was about, I think, 20 years old. And Tori was really struggling with drugs, and she went home and breastfed Braden and suffocated him.
Blake, you guys did a great job on this. I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.
When we come back, we'll have a look at local headlines. Please stay with us.